Welcome to Lead Different, the podcast that redefines leadership and challenges the status quo. Hosted by Daniel Dominguez, founder and CEO of Why Not Leadership. This show is your compass to becoming a better leader through the power of self-awareness. Good leaders foster teams that are engaged, empowered, and energized. Join us on this transformative journey as we equip you with the tools and insights to lead different. Get ready to challenge the ordinary and embrace self-aware leadership. This is Lead Different.
Subscribe now. Discover a new era of leadership. Lead different, because great leaders change the world.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lead Different podcast. I am excited to introduce you to our guest today, Lisa Schermerhorn. She has over 20 years of experience as a transformational leader, author of the best-selling book, In Every Belief is a Lie, which I highly recommend. And she's an expert in the field of human behavior, leadership, and personal development. She's an award-winning speaker and has spoken at Harvard and Columbia University as a featured Blue Talk speaker. She also trained in the winner's mindset with Bob Reese, the former head trainer of the New York Jets, and helped a professional golfer win Golfer of the Year. She was a VP of business development for an innovative startup company using virtual reality to help clients with pain reduction, memory loss, and stress reduction. As a certified hypnotherapist and master practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming, she helps entrepreneurs and high performers from where they are to where they want to be much faster than conventional coaches. Lisa is also trained as a why coach, helping people discover their why based on Simon Sinek's Know Your Why. Lisa not only helps individuals discover their why, but she also helps people discover the why of their business and how to use it in their branding. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce you all to my good friend, Lisa Schermerhorn. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Hi. Oh my God. I love this so much. And I have to say, first of all, thank you for having me. And second of all, I just consider you a dear friend. From the moment we connected a couple of years ago, you really lead with your heart, and one of the most important parts of you. So I appreciate you so much.
Well, Lisa, right back at you. We were talking in the pre-show about our journey. We've known each other now for a few years. We're fellow why coaches. So full disclosure, if you're listening, you're going to hear us talk about why, because we're familiar with it. It's something we have in common, but we're also going to talk about how to use that different. And Lisa definitely is someone who's going to do it differently. And I really want you to hear about what she does, the different experiences that she brings to the table, and how she has implemented why into the work that she does. But not only that, I want you to hear about Lisa's story. I want to hear about her background. I want you to understand what it takes to become a successful best-selling author like Lisa, to take those wounds that we all carry from our childhood. I was just talking to a colleague, Lisa, about all of us. It's a client that I'm coaching, and he said, I have a feeling that this manager that works for me, he's got some dad authority issues. And because he says to me, hey, you're not my dad, right? How many times now, I know we probably have all thought that in our work to someone that we're working with. He actually says it out loud. So we know that we all have, Rosie Ward, another good friend of both of ours, when she takes you in her courageous leadership program, she takes you back to that 10-year-old Daniel or that 10-year-old Lisa and says, hey, let's unpack that. What are you carrying right now? And you do a lot of work in that. So we'll get into that also. But Lisa, it is a pleasure to have you. You are a dear friend, and I love that you're an example to my little challenge daughter, Sophia, of what's possible when you have the why of challenge. You and Rosie and all those amazing why coaches that she's had the opportunity to meet. So welcome to the show, and I can't wait to just get into the conversation.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And, it's interesting when you talk about being a challenge, for those people know that there's the 9 different whys. When you and I did the assessment for me, it changed so much for me, because going back to that little Lisa who had learning disabilities as a child, what happened for me was, I remember being in kindergarten and everyone was doing their math. They were doing their counting, their numbers, their letters and reading. And I was lost. And no one knew that I had learning disabilities back then. So I spent every summer in summer school, And I just thought that I wasn't smart. But what happened was I learned differently. I had to learn differently because I was struggling. I was transposing letters and numbers. And so it took me a lot longer to learn than other people. I still struggle with that. And so going through this process and learning that my why was challenged instead of feeling broken, it empowered me to realize, yes, that is also my superpower. Being different was something that was a really, it was painful as a child because I was bullied a lot. And now I take that and go, yes, I'm different. And that's my superpower. And I use that every day in the work that I do.
I love that you brought that up, and I'm going to have on the show Dr. Holly Ward, who has done a lot of research into different learning, and she says, look, there's no such thing as attention deficit disorder because it is not a deficit. In order for it to be a deficit, it has to be detrimental to you. And you know better than most people that our ADHD can actually, or ADHD, or whatever you want to call it, is not a deficit. It's actually a gift. And it's something that helps us learn different. It helps us be creative and lead different, right?
Exactly. And they've said, actually, I think it was the chairman of Staples or the I think he was ADD and barely got through school. A lot of entrepreneurs and people who think outside the box do learn differently. And Dr. Howard Gardner of Harvard University actually came up with these 9 different types of intelligences because some people are athletes, right? Some people are really good at math and memorizing and logic. And so everyone has their own gifts, and it's important to teach to that. And what I discovered was I'm not good at memorizing large amounts of information and IQ type of tests. But what I'm really good at is EQ, emotional intelligence. And I didn't know that that was a thing until much later on in my life, and realized that, depending upon how you're assessed, can make you feel either you're smart or you're not smart. And so it's really about going inward and everyone understanding that you have your own brilliance and your own intelligence, and your greatest wounds are your greatest gifts.
Oh, I love that you brought that up. Your greatest wounds are your greatest gifts. And by the way, I said Holly Ward because I've got Rosie Ward on my mind, and they're both PhDs. It's Dr. Holly White that gave us that great insight on your ADHD is a gift, right? But you talked about that. Take us back to that for you, Lisa, and as a kid who learned differently. One of the things I have found, and you probably have too. I was looking up. You have been a Y coach for over 3 years. January of 21 was yes. So we are in 2024, and you have been a coach for over 3 years. So you've helped a lot of people discover their why. One of the things I've learned from working with people is people with the why of challenge either are wildly successful or wildly unsuccessful. Because if you take a person like Lisa and you put her in that classroom and you say, hey, follow the rules, stay within the lines, follow the process, that person is going to feel unsuccessful and go home and saying, gosh, why am I so different? When that person, or you put that same 10-year-old in a different environment where they say, oh my gosh, you're so creative. I love the ideas you came up with, and I love how you're different. They grow up with a lot of confidence, and they have no fear of being outside the box. Right. You were probably somewhere in between. You probably had encouragement on some ends, and then on other ends, it was a hindrance for you. But take us back to that.
So because I didn't think I was very smart, I kind of diminished myself at school. So I remember being in classroom, but if it was something that I was interested in and I liked, that was where I would put my interest in and get excited about it. But there wasn't a lot of that until I really got into high school and then into college. So that excitement, but what I discovered was that I was actually very creative and artistic. Mm-hmm. And I went to Rhode Island School of Design for a summer program. And while I was there, I was 15 years old. The dean of the school pulled me aside and said, I know you're in the summer before your junior year. And I know this is awful early, but we just want you to know that you're in. We want you to come to school here. And that blew me away because that was considered like one of the top art schools in the country. Now, in my parents' mind, art going to become a professional artist means that they were probably going to have to support me for the rest of my life. So that was not going to happen. They said to me, we don't want you a poor starving artist and we don't want you to marry one. So that was off the table. And that was actually a big blow to me because it was something that I was really good at for the first time in my life. And then I felt like it was snatched away. I understand now why they did it. And I'm actually grateful that I didn't go to that school because I had to go down the path that I did. And I've had an incredible life and I spent all this time overcoming a lot of those belief systems. But, going to conventional therapy. So I had a breakdown when I was 38 years old. I was suicidal. I didn't want to be here. I was going to therapy 2 to 3 times a week because I was like, I don't have a purpose. I just felt really worthless. All of a sudden, someone said to me, why don't you go see this hypnotherapist? And I was like, I didn't understand it. All I saw were those people on the stages making people quack like a duck. And I was like, are you crazy? But I was desperate. I needed something. And when I went to see this woman, it changed my life because I couldn't believe how fast she was able to get to the root cause of my issue. And it brought me on to not only study that, I studied NLP, Neuro Linguistic Programming, and other cutting edge, unique and different tools that are not normally out there, that someone who goes to a conventional therapist is not going to get what they get with me. And that's okay. There's a place for both of us. But what I like to say is I can get to the root cause quickly. You come to me and I ask your higher self because your higher self has the answers to everything. You already have everything you need. You have the answers inside. I'm just getting you to unlock them. And when I get you to unlock them, what happens is the programming that came in that someone said to you, you realize that's not mine. So you take your power back. You're letting it go. And, someone who says, in a business environment where they're projecting their childhood wounds onto their bosses or onto the people who work for them, it's important to go back and release that so that they don't get triggered by their coworkers, their bosses. Because once you heal that, then you're neutral. And a lot of the work that I do is getting people neutral about it. So they're out of their stress levels. They can look at things from a new perspective. And the other thing that people don't realize is that you can inherit belief systems as well. We have family patterns that can go back generations. I've worked with people back up to 10 generations, clearing out old belief systems that we're carrying, and we have no way to access that or know it. But you may have all of a sudden scarcity issues around money. And you're like, I shouldn't have any money issues. Why would I have money issues? But maybe your grandfather survived the Depression and had major scarcity issues that came down through your DNA. So it's kind of like a clearinghouse that happens, and you get to discover who you are at the deepest level.
It's great. So, man, that was a great answer, and I love it when you got so much out of that question. But let's dig into a couple of them. One is your parents, being afraid to send you to that art school. One of the things that Dr. Holly White talked about, and she doesn't even call it ADD. She calls it a creative. You don't have ADHD or ADD. You have a creative divergent mind. Right. And isn't that a great description for how you think? Because that's where you thrive, in a place where you can be creative, you can be divergent, and you can share your different. But what's really cool about your path, Lisa, is you went the conventional route, and now you're bringing that creativity to this world. Right. And now, and you talked about your practice. So you're a trained hypnotherapist, because you not only went to a trained hypnotherapist, you are now one. You're also NLP trained. What is the biggest advantage that you see using those disciplines in the coaching that you do?
So the interesting thing that I learned about studying the unconscious mind is that we actually move in and out of 5 different brain frequencies throughout the day, let alone through your life. So when you're born, you're in something called delta and then theta, which are these big, wide waves, and they're slow. And that's where all this information is absorbed. And so this is why we have trouble remembering certain things that happen when we're younger, because we don't really access that part of the brain. Right now, we're at something called beta, which is a wave like this, and that's our conscious mind. When we meditate and when we're in hypnosis, we're in something called alpha, and that's also our learning state. So when I work with someone, I'll take them back and just relax them. They're in full control of everything, but that part of their brain, that part of their mind remembers and takes us back to something someone said when they were 3 years old. And they're like, I would never have associated that. For instance, when I first started, I was working with someone who wanted to quit smoking, and they had been smoking for 40 years. Well, when he was 12 years old, his father passed away. His uncle gave him a cigarette to help him quit smoke, actually to feel better, because that's what they did back then. And what happens is when you smoke, it actually suppresses your grief and emotions. So he needed the cigarette so that he didn't feel. And what happened was he never fully grieved the death of his father. So when I worked with him, we went right to that moment at the cemetery, and we released the grief that he'd been holding on to for over 40 years. And then he was able to, he didn't have to smoke anymore. So what people don't realize is that there's all these beliefs and unconscious feelings and things that happen that are buried deep that we don't have access to.
Man, I love how you took us down that path, and again, taking us back to that trauma. That's something that holds us back. Your latest book is called "In Every Belief Is a Lie." So yes, and I love the play on words, because you've got lie as part of belief, and so you talked about that in the work that you did with this client. So getting to those lies, that subconscious that we tell ourselves, and the frequencies. There's a couple of things. I'm gonna get some free coaching out of you, and then hey, by the way, the audience is gonna get some free coaching here too. So my wife says I am horrible at remembering bad things, because I take, something bad happens or something negative happens, I choose to block it out. I just will not remember. She's like, don't you remember it was awful? And I say, no, I really, and my 12-year-old gets so mad at me. He's like, Dad, remember? And I'm like, no, I guess I blocked that out because it wasn't good. So is that a defense mechanism that I'm using?
It absolutely is. So you're compartmentalizing. So there's two ways that the brain works. So some people will just put it off, and other people will completely disassociate and not remember it all. Right? So it depends on how your brain works around that. But here's what happens. When you suppress a bad thing, it's like putting your finger in a dike, right? You're trying to hold the water back. And meanwhile, the dike is cracking, that dam is cracking.
Right.
It has to go somewhere. So when you keep suppressing it and don't release it and let it go, what happens is it manifests into physical and emotional issues. Anxiety comes up, PTSD comes up. You might have a certain physical ailment that comes up. Oftentimes people with lower back or shoulders are feeling the weight of the world. Back has money issues or feeling unsupported. You can have all kinds of body-mind disconnect because you're going to the doctor because you have the shoulder issue, but it's emotionally based. Right. And so that's where I always get to the root cause of, have you had a lot of physical issues? And then there's an emotional self-talk about that. We can go right to that issue, release it. I had a woman come to me who's a hiker. She's literally hiked Mount Everest. Her hip hurt her so much she could barely walk. She got in my office. We discovered she had major issues with her mother. Mm-hmm. We cleared her issues with her mother. She forgave her mother and got off the table without any pain. None. None. And I can't guarantee that with everyone, but that's where she was holding her pain.
So how weird and different am I? Because I don't have back pain. I don't have any of those issues. I'm physically pretty good. Maybe I have food issues, Lisa. I do love to eat. I'm always trying to be in better shape. Maybe that's where it's manifesting itself. But I do remember those things. And then I just say, you know what? I choose not to keep that as a memory. One of the things I've learned, and I think you talked about it, and I don't know, I think Melanie Ake, I think, is who shared this with me. She said, one of the best things you can do is forgive people, accept an apology from someone who's never apologized. So act as if they've apologized and then accept their
Yes.
apology and then treat them as if they've apologized. And boy, is that a freeing thing, right? I'm sure you do some of that. Tell me a little bit
I
about that.
do a lot around that. Thank you. Because forgiveness is one of the greatest miracles that you can do for yourself and others. And I had someone I hadn't spoken to in 14 years. And I had started doing something called the Ho'oponopono, which is an ancient Hawaiian forgiveness prayer. And I was part of a group. I learned about it through Dr. Joe Vitale, who was in the movie The Secret, and I had read his book, Zero Limits. So I was part of this group. I was using prayer with a bunch of people. I had a stack of people that I was holding resentment and anger for. And I found that as I released them and as I forgave them using these techniques, all of the sudden, the title of my book, I've been trying to write my book for 15 years. The title of my book came up. I started writing. That person called me out of the blue and said, I miss you. I want you back in my life. I want to figure out how we can make this work. Now, they have never apologized. They've never acknowledged that they ever did or said anything.
Mm-hmm.
And because I really forgave them, then I'm neutral. And they have changed as well. I can't explain it, but I will tell you that truly forgiving, because there are people saying, I've forgiven them.
Right.
Right?
Right. Yeah. I've forgiven him, but no. Right. Yeah.
No, they haven't. So when you're neutral around them, then you know you've truly forgiven them.
That's fantastic. And so we're going to get into that a little bit more, but one of the quotes that comes to mind, somebody said, holding a grudge is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die, because it's really only impacting you, right?
Right. They're not even thinking about you, right?
Right.
And then I always say to my clients, how much from 0 to 100, 100 being everything, what percentage is that person taking up space in your head? And oftentimes they'll be like 60%, 80%. And I say, wow, that's lost time and lost creativity that you will never get back. How is that helping you?
You're letting that person live in your head rent free, right?
Yes.
And that event, that resentment. And so you help people get rid of that and get onto that next place, right? Replace it with something positive. The other thing, that I've heard around forgiveness that I think is really important is you can move on.
Yes.
Whether or not, and this is important. Forgiving someone doesn't mean you have to let them back into your life. You chose to do that. But you can forgive someone and say, you know what? I don't want you in my house. I don't want to associate with you. I do forgive you, but you don't have to trust them again. And so that's an important line to draw, I believe, for people. Tell us about how you deal with that, because I'm sure you have.
Exactly. And there are people who I've forgiven who I've not brought back into my life. There are people who I brought back in a limited way because, there was a reason why things happened. But when there are certain people who are important in your life, at least in my life, I chose to let them back in a limited way. But with other people, I'm like, you know what? This person keeps doing the same thing over and over again. And that's when I'm like, you know what? I need to protect myself. I need to set boundaries. And so it's important for me to, live by that. Now, I've forgiven them. I'm not triggered by them, but they're not someone that I really choose to want to hang out with.
Yeah. And I think that is so important because, for me, there are people that I choose to forgive that I may not let back into my life because I'm married now. Right. And I also have a 12-year-old daughter that I don't want to expose to that kind of negativity or whatever it was that that person brought into my life. I forgive you. I totally understand that, we're all doing our best given what we've got. Right. And that's
Right.
something that it took me a while to learn. Some people don't have the level of education, the level of understanding of themselves, the self-awareness that you and I are equipped with, or even some of the people that we work with. So they're doing the best given what they've got. And sometimes if that best is not good enough to be a part of your life, that's okay. Let's
Right.
forgive them and let them go on with their lives.
Well, also imagine, in a workspace, everyone's doing the best they can. And I always lead with that, but not everyone is nice. Not everyone is someone who I want to be best friends with, who I have to work with, but I still have to work with them. If I release whatever's triggering me about them and I get myself to neutral, then I can be an observer. I don't have to take up time in my brain, time in my thoughts, becoming resentful and angry about what they're doing. I can just go, oh, there they go again, and just be an observer. And that takes stress off of you that you don't have to bring home. And the same thing is when you're home and there's very stressful things going on there. If you learn to become neutral about situations and release that, then you can go to work and be much more efficient as well.
Yes. And I think, and so you're going right along the path that I want to talk about for leaders. How important is it? How important is, because one of the things I talk about in the work that I do with leaders is about being self-aware, because getting that self-awareness and understanding yourself,
Right.
your challenges and how to overcome the challenges. And you also have a superpower. So for Lisa, hey, your superpower is that you're going to challenge the status quo and think differently and bring creativity. That's all. That also, as Gary Sanchez likes to say, a little chocolate is good. Too much is bad,
Right.
right? So you can challenge the status quo and do things differently, but you're going to need some structure. So understanding that there are limitations to that creativity in order to live in a society that has laws that we have to follow, right? If challengers wrote the traffic laws, it'd be no speed limits or stop signs, and we'd all be in car crashes all the time. That wouldn't be a good thing. But understanding that self-awareness is so important. So you talked about the YOS is such a simple discovery that we take people
Right.
through, but it made such a big difference for you. I think what you do that is really great is you bring some of that additional depth with your NLP training, with your
Right.
hypnotherapy training, and then the vast background of the things that you've done. How do you start with why and then expand?
Well, this was a game changer for me in my coaching, because when I get someone's why, each why has a gift and a challenge. So I immediately know where to start. It's my starting point. So if I get a challenge and the challenge person is struggling because they don't feel like they fit in, they feel misunderstood, I know that that's the first question I'm going to ask them is, do you feel understood, misunderstood? Are you struggling? With all of them, it's the first place to go so I can be really efficient in the work that I'm doing. And I love that, especially with right way people. When someone who's right way, they may be really inflexible and my way or the highway. And my work with them is to help them build trust and help them become more flexible and trusting themselves. And so that is the gift that keeps on giving with the why.
So then now I love what you talked about. So their strengths and their challenges. Let's talk about this, Lisa. One of the things that I have found in Paul Epstein talks about this. There's prevention and then there's the medicine, right?
Right.
Sometimes we are more prone to, we want the medicine. Here's what's wrong with me. Can you give me something to cure that? And so speaking to the positive side of it is great. But sometimes what I have found is I connect really well when I talk to people's challenges. When I say, hey, your whys make sense. And so one of the challenges I know of people that make sense is you tend to be seen as a know-it-all because you tend to take in information really quickly process it. And so everybody thinks everything has to, especially if you're the leader, everything has to go through Lisa because she's the make sense person, right? So we got to run it through her. She's going to have the best ideas. But then you also become the bottleneck in the organization. And when I bring that up, oh my goodness, those leaders are like, yes, I wish people would make decisions on their own, but they don't realize that it's them that's causing the bottleneck because they never allow other people to solve problems because they're so good at it.
You know, it's so true. And I was literally on a podcast yesterday with a gentleman who did his why. We talked about it, and his whys make sense. And he's in Egypt. And he was talking about the fact that because he's makes sense, he has the problem already solved in his head. And so once he did his why, he learned to back off. And he's actually gotten much better success rate in sales, in bringing in more business, because he realized that his answer may not be the same answer as theirs, and that he had to plant seeds and let them to come to their own conclusion and literally, run that carrot or the seeds to get them to their answer. And he does that with his business partner now too, is that he now has this way where he allows the two of them to come together, even though in his mind he thinks he knows the answer. They work together. And he said it was really transformative for him.
Yeah. Lisa, you're doing such great work. I'm going to have to get you back on the show and tell me, but what are you excited about right now? What are you working on that's really exciting that our listeners need to know? And then let us know how to get a hold of you. Is it through LinkedIn? What's the best way to get a hold of Lisa?
Well, you can get my website is lisamindset.com. It's shortened for Lisa Schermerhorn Coaching. Try and spell Schermerhorn. The coaching is such a passion for me. And you can reach me through my website, through LinkedIn. And if you want to know what your why is and you want to do if you're struggling in your life, there's so many people, not only, when you're working with coaches, you may have some ancestral stuff. This is stuff that no one else does. You may have, if you see patterns in your family that are going on, I bet you it goes back to a grandparent or great-grandparent. I can help you clear all that and clear it for your family. And so I've been having a lot of fun with that, along with the regular coaching that I do.
That is fantastic. Lisa, why don't we, I think that's a great answer. I want people to reach out to you, get the book, Lisa Schermerhorn's book, And Every Belief is a Lie. She's been on an amazing tour of speaking and at a couple of Ivy League schools recently. I'm just a big fan of Lisa Schermerhorn. I think if you get to know her and follow some of the stuff that she does, she posts regularly on LinkedIn. I love following her. So follow her. She's also got a great podcast that she recently launched. What's the name of the podcast, Lisa?
Lisa Mindset.
Okay, perfect. So lisamindset.com is the website. Lisa Mindset is the name of the podcast. Get a hold of Lisa if you're looking to get rid of some of that ancestral stuff that we're all carrying around, or if you want to get back to be back to your best self using those different brain frequencies that you talked about, those 5 frequencies. Yeah. There's a lot to find out. So Lisa, what do you say we end the show on that note?
Sounds great.
Thank you so much, Lisa. We will see you soon. I can't wait to talk to you offline. I know we're going to be collaborating on something good soon. And for the rest of you, join us on the Lead Different podcast next week when I'll bring another amazing guest who'll share some of their ways that they can lead different. Have a great week, everyone.
Subscribe now. Discover a new era of leadership. Lead different because great leaders change the world.